For most of Christian history, the church was the center of logical discussion in the sciences, but in the past century, something has changed in that relationship. What has changed? Why has it occurred? Why has it happened in the last 100 years?
I'd say even more than the last 100 years, or the last 500, really since the time of the Enlightenment. There's been a shift in scientific theological debate. The first Enlightenment happened with the burst of information, with the printing press. Suddenly information could be, before then the church kind of contained all the information, so Galileo wasn't allowed to say the truth, or Copernicus was not allowed to say the truth, in those kind of sense that they contained the truth. And with the birth of the printing press, suddenly there's a rise in literacy. Suddenly, it was illegal for a Roman Catholic to do an autopsy, but a Jewish person could do an autopsy, write about it, give it to a Roman Catholic, and then they could learn what the Jewish person had learned. So there was this burst of information that happened, and that moved. So suddenly, it couldn't be encapsulated within the faith tradition. Knowledge and information could be held by the church, and you couldn't. I mean, that's why it seems so funny to us that the church is like, no, we are the center of the universe, and the rest of the people are kind of, what is this? What's wrong with these people? And so I think over the last 500 years, it's been a logic. That's just been a progression all along, and I think that's one reason why we're at another. In the terms of the Church of Reformation, another great burst of information has occurred with internet, with cable television, with quick information being passed. That there's a whole shift, which we call now just postmodernism, because we don't know what it means. The last 500 years has been modernism. Now we're in a new thing after that we're trying to figure out. And so,
every time I see like a Christian on TV, one of those Christians that has their services on the television, not necessarily televangelists, but just they broadcast their sermons. Every time I talk to a younger Christian, they're totally not into that. And every time you talk to them, that I talk to them, they always say, check out this author, like I said, the Rob Bell, Don Miller type of people. It seems like I don't meet very many younger Christians. Maybe I'm just not in the right places, but I don't meet very many young people that are like, you got to listen to what James Dobson has to say about this. No one says that. I'm wondering, are we going to see this huge shift at some point in the near future when all those people that are like the political figureheads of the Christian right are going to kind of disappear and not be listened to as much, and this new generation is going to come in? And like, if that is, when's that going to happen?
I do believe that. I do believe that's happening. When I talk about, I do a long thing on postmodernism, and teach long classes on it and that sort of thing. And I do believe that shift is happening, and it's not so much like something we're teaching and that we're learning. It just is. The new generations see the world different. When I think about the creation evolution debate, I really feel like that's baby boomers doing that as the last of the modern. They're really involved in that conversation. Whenever I try to bring that up in a group like our church, they're all like, meh, 7 days, 20 minutes, 4 gazillion years. Who really cares? I wasn't there, you weren't there. I just think God made it, and that seems to be enough for me. I find a lot of these great conversations are really baby boomers because they're the last of the modern era, last generation. In that sort of sense of black and white. And have you also noticed that all the questions are the ones that we can't answer with a yes or no? Like, hey, we should help poor people. Yeah, but let's talk about gays. The question that we want to talk about is often the one that gets ignored because we want to talk about the one that doesn't have an easy answer. Because frankly, we don't know until we die what some of those answers are. And I think in our generation, we're comfortable with some more of that ambiguity, a little bit more of saying, I don't know, let's talk about it. It's a good question. It's a conversation we're having. Is my whole faith wrapped up in some of these issues? I don't think so. And so I do think that shift is going to occur. There will always be a religious right. There will always be the spectrum that will always exist. But I do think that as younger people who have had a completely different experience of the world come into being, that whole shift will happen. When? Probably 40 years, as I'm on the high end of the postmodern generation, and as I get old, and I actually get elected to offices and things like that, that shift, I think, will definitely occur.
How is the internet affecting atheistic and theistic worldviews, beliefs, and so on?
I know from personal experience, from people who have written to me and I talked to, at least from the atheist side, most young atheists don't know any other atheists. Like, not in their families, for sure, mostly not in their lives. They don't really know anyone else they could talk to about these things. And all of a sudden you see atheists, like, you could find atheist blogs. You could read a lot of these books. Like, I was saying this to someone a while ago. When I became an atheist in high school, you know, the God Delusion, Sam Harris's books, none of those things really existed. And now, this generation growing up, like, they have all this awesome reading material that's really interesting. They could talk to real atheists. They could read what atheists have to say online. And so it's easier for them to admit that they don't believe in God. And I think that's awesome. Like, they have that opportunity, and it's not as scary of a thing. They could, I mean, there was a whole thing called the Blasphemy Challenge, where they said, go on YouTube, make a video of yourself saying you don't believe in God, and this is why I don't believe, and I deny the Holy Spirit, because supposedly that's the worst thing you could ever say. And the fact that you had so many young people able and willing to do that, I don't think that's something you would have even seen 5-6 years ago. So I'm excited by it. I think it's really awesome, and I think the internet and the fact that you could reach all these other atheists and talk to them. There are like social networking sites like Facebook popping up specifically for atheists. There are dating sites just for atheists. There's like 2 people on them, but like they're there. But it's happening, and that's really awesome.
Which I'd like to go back to that blasphemy. Would it ever occur to anyone to do the same to Muhammad, to Buddha? Because as a Christian, I was offended.
Yeah, by the blasphemy challenge.
By the blasphemy challenge, because that is something that I do hold. It's a core value that they poked.
Yeah.
That was not very fair to me, and not being able to respond to that.
In terms of that, I think some of the videos did. They didn't just deny the Christian God. They denied they believing in other gods as well. I think the reason it was specifically directed at Christianity, and I think when you see some of those bus ads, they're maybe not in the wording, because some of them are just God in general, but the reason most of that's directed to Christianity is because that's what most of the atheists are brought up with. That's what we're used to, at least in America. That's the popular one. It's not that we condone Islam or that's not the right word for it, but it's not like we don't want to touch that religion as opposed to Christianity. I think it's just the Christianity is the one that's prevalent, and so it's a bigger deal to say no to the Christian God than it is the other ones.
But I would say that would take us a step back in terms of that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. And there were a lot of videos that I saw that I wasn't particularly fond of. And personally, I don't like it when those type of things are directed just at the Christian God. If you're going to deny God, then I think deny it in general. I don't think there's any reason to specify one or the other. But I know just from reading the websites and writing on my own site, most of the criticism you see on religion is directed to Christianity because that's the one we deal with. It's the culture, yeah.
What's the biggest critiques that you have of your own individual communities? Kind of the atheist community to Christian community?
Bunch of jerks. I say this about any community I'm with. My church would be awesome if it just weren't for all the people. We are. It's not a critique. It's we are a fractured group. We struggle. We wonder. We wrestle with the things of the world. There's always this sense in the church of consumerism that we consume church, that we use it for our own desire as opposed to what we would call a holy desire. And I think that goes beyond even just my own church, but the church in general. I really love my people for all that they are and all that they aren't, and for all their fractures as much as for all their beauty.
I think the biggest criticism of atheists I see is, when you see the books that are topping the atheist bestseller list, so to speak, all those books, a lot of the older atheists too, they're much more focused on ripping down the idea of God than they are in putting anything up in its place. They're not really building anything in its place. I think what makes me excited is a lot of the books that are coming out now. Like there are books out now about how to raise children without religion. And I think that's great. Like, that's a book you never would have seen. And that has nothing to do with teach your child that there's no God. It's like, look, there are ways to have alternatives to, ceremonies and traditions without the idea of religion. And I don't really see that a lot. And I think the biggest criticism is everyone's so focused on, like, we must convince everybody that, they shouldn't believe in God. Well, that's not the only issue, though, for a lot of people. And most people don't really care. And what are you doing in its place? What are you doing to help them?